Thanks for coming back to Stay on Topic. We're three middle-aged men sit in a dining room to talk about stuff on a Sunday. To my right is Bob Ricardo, who's worked in education, news, marketing, PR, all-around good guy. Bob Ricardo, how are you?
Pretty good on this beautiful spring day. No place I'd rather be than inside.
We're going to take it on the road after we refine the show.
Excellent.
And to my left, the creator of Stay on Topic, who is assistant managing editor at The Leader, James Post.
You know, my career history always sounds less interesting than Bob's does.
And he's leaving out the pornography.
I'd like you to make up some things.
Okay, yeah. Next episode, we'll have a full list for you.
Former Dragon Slayer.
Drag queen.
Current.
No.
Sure. Yeah. You never leave the life.
No, it's always a part of you. So off to a really weird start. Speaking of weird, things are really weird in Washington and in Moscow. James, what the heck is going on?
Well, you know, to be fair, I think things are pretty normal in Moscow. I think their access to Washington has increased, but I think Moscow's running pretty much how they'd like it to be running. So a lot of stuff going on in the last week. Obviously, guy taking a lot of heat right now, Devin Nunes. This is a pet peeve of mine. I keep hearing people on TV, on radio, keep pronouncing it Nunez.
Yeah, there's no tilde or schwa or whatever.
Yeah, and the last name actually is rooted in Portuguese, so that the N would not be pronounced that way. It is correctly Nunez.
Does this guy do his research or what?
He's meticulous.
Yeah. Didn't know the Portuguese thing.
Puts us to shame.
Right.
Why don't you just talk for an hour?
Yeah.
Regale us with your tales of daring do.
Okay. So Nunez is the head of some House committee. I don't remember which one. No, he's the chair of the House Intelligence Committee. Obviously, one of the people expected to be looking into these potential ties between the Trump campaign and or the Trump administration and the Russians, and already facing questions about his independence after he came out supporting Trump's accusations that he'd been wiretapped by the Obama administration, when even Speaker Paul Ryan was saying that there was no evidence to support that. Then he comes back this week saying that he has info that Trump staffers had been monitored incidentally in the process of gathering other intelligence, but he can't tell the Intelligence Committee where he got the information from. People whose job it is to hear the things that no one else in Congress can hear. New York Times reporting that the source of that info was actually some White House staffers. White House saying that's not the case. Nunes saying that's not the case. Whoever the source was, he got it while in the White House. There was a really interesting moment where the White House was at one point saying that they weren't even aware that Nunes had been there. And there were questions about that during the White House briefing. Sean Spicer saying, "We don't monitor everyone who's on the 18-acre grounds," which is somewhat frightening.
Could this get any more amateur hour?
It got a little bit more amateur hour.
Nice segue.
When
Thanks, I wrote it over here.
Wow, that was awful. When Representative Ted Yoho, Republican of Florida, went on NBC and when asked why Nunes, wasn't going to turn over his sources, said, said Nunes, quote, "works for the president. He reports to the president." Those comments were later walked, or rather run back quite quickly. With a statement from Yoho's office saying he realizes that he does work for his constituents and not the White House or the president.
Yeah, that whole separation of powers thing is tricky.
Trickier than it used to be, at least. that's just part one.
Yeah. You haven't even gotten to the immunity thing yet.
Yeah. Well, first off, let's get to Paul Manafort, former campaign chair for now President Donald Trump, who may or may not testify before the House Intelligence Committee or Senate Intelligence Committee, and may or may not be doing so in an open hearing rather than a closed hearing. That hasn't been determined. A lot of people wondering what a campaign chair would have to say in front of the Intelligence Committee that couldn't be said in open hearing. Presumably didn't have that much access to classified information. So speculation as to whether any kind of closed hearing would be basically just to protect him. And then, of course, there's former general and former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn suddenly coming forward and saying that he would testify before basically anybody in exchange for immunity, which is already funny because lots of people, including Republican Lindsey Graham, came forward and pointed out that Flynn actually had a recorded quote saying that you don't need immunity if you haven't committed a crime during the campaign. So that's fun.
The whole lock her up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in regards to the investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails, the Senate Intelligence Committee has already said no deal on that, headed by Republican Richard Burr of North Carolina. Said basically they weren't interested in an immunity deal. In the meantime, and not unrelated, there's obviously still an FBI investigation kind of chugging away in the background of all of this. I think, not sure what the original, I saw it in USA Today, but I'm assuming not to badmouth anyone at USA Today, but I'm assuming that wasn't the original source of the news, but that's where I saw it, that anonymous FBI sources are saying that they haven't decided whether they would consider Flynn's ask for immunity or not. Adam Schiff, who's the ranking Democrat on House Intelligence, his comment on whether they would accept that deal was basically that they would want to see, as would be normal, a full proffer of what his testimony would be before they decided whether to grant him immunity or not. No idea really at this point whether anyone's going forward with that process. So I get, the question is, and I'm not sure it's even a question at this point, but I'll pose it anyway. Is this sort of more of the same, team that can't shoot straight that we've had since the inauguration, or is this turning into a spiral?
This whole situation reminds me of the Lannister family tree from Game of Thrones. It is so convoluted. I can't follow all.
And I'm only really scratching the surface. There's so much more we can get into, but no one else would get an opportunity to speak.
And given the news of the last week, does anybody really believe the House of Representatives can properly investigate this? I mean, doesn't this scream special prosecutor?
A lot of people are saying that, and a lot of those people are Republicans. Some of the obvious ones, like Lindsey Graham, who obviously is still not happy with Donald Trump and he
hates him.
Yeah.
And
John McCain, obviously another who's come out and talked about a select committee or a full commission, something that would be relatively independent, which Nunes at this point really seems like he just doesn't, there's nothing he could do at this point to make himself look independent, in my own opinion. And
I don't know if you guys read Slate this week. Former GOP strategist Rick Wilson is basically outing the Republicans as no one really likes Trump. They're just trying to get their stuff through before he gets impeached because it seems like an inevitability. And he had one of the best quotes. Donald Trump could murder a child on the White House lawn and eat him raw, and those pussies in Congress will never do a thing.
Wow. We're using the P word, huh?
It's a direct quote from Rick Wilson.
Okay.
Yeah, and I take anything that's in Slate with a grain of salt, but that isn't really a shocking revelation. It's
No, but it's the first time that anybody said it.
yeah.
And it's just nice to have it confirmed.
It's really like a Chinese water torture over there, a drip, drip, drip of scandals. I mean, Shonda Rhimes would be looking at this and saying, no one's going to believe this. This is too far-fetched. When is the straw going to break the camel's back at this point?
Yeah, what is that? I think we discussed this, on the first episode. What is that last straw that will finally get the Republicans to denounce the Trump presidency?
I don't know, but I've got to believe that anybody who's paying even halfway attention to the news, any independent, any conservative leaning independent has got to start walking away from the Trump administration at this point.
Well, and there's been some polling out this week, and it's interesting. Overall approval ratings dropped to something like 36%, 37%, as high as 40%, depending on whose polls you're looking at. But among committed Republicans, dropped from like 88 to 84 in that same period. So the base isn't leaving him. Independents seem to be leaving him. Those numbers were dropping at basically the same level. Not that his highest approval rating has been like 46, but those numbers among independents were basically dropping at the same rate they were dropping among Democrats. But Republican support, as far as among the voters, still really strong.
And this reminds me a little bit of the Nixon administration, because weren't diehard Republicans the last to leave Nixon as well? So,
just a note for listeners: that was not Bob Ricotta being given the gong. That was me. That was me, incredibly clumsily hitting my own mic stand.
Although it would be appropriate given the recent death of Chuck Barris, the creator of the Gong Show,
and former CIA hitman.
Yep. Rest in peace.
No. Although seems like the kind of guy who might have gotten to the bottom of some of this.
He did bring the Unknown comic into my home, which counts for a lot.
And Gene the Dancing Machine. So back to the topic at hand.
We should really try to stay on topic.
Nice. I've got to believe that House members in vulnerable districts have got to start leaving the ship soon.
How many of those are there?
Yeah.
Probably very few. They've gerrymandered the hell out of the House of Representatives, but there are some, and I don't have names, I don't have numbers, but there are some districts that, are within 5 points. There are districts where a Republican won, but Hillary also won in that district.
Yeah.
And, all you need is 20, 22 to, the Republican majority is 22, I believe, in the House. So, and the Democrats certainly aren't going to be voting. They smell blood. They're not going to be voting with Trump anytime soon.
Too bad they're the worst predators in the natural world and don't know what to do with the blood when they smell it.
And if I can just jump off on another tangent for a moment, not something that was actually on the agenda for today, but something that's come up this week, and it's something that we actually talked about on our first podcast that we recorded, the nomination of Neil Gorsuch, and the fact that there appears at this point to be a pretty strong agreement among Democrats to invoke the filibuster against Gorsuch, which then
causes the nuclear option to come into play.
Yeah. Which then, creates the opportunity that Mitch McConnell may just decide to eliminate the filibuster for Supreme Court nominees. Not sure how eager he is to do that, given that, as we saw with the Democrats invoking that for lower level judicial nominees, you can't really go back from that.
Right.
You're not going to come in with a new majority and reverse those rules changes. They're pretty much they're pretty much precedent once they're established. So,
And I agree, Chris, that Democrats most of the time can't seem to get out of their own way. I've got to give them credit this week. They've mostly kept their mouths shut and let the Republicans do their own damage. So maybe they've learned from past mistakes.
Or they got distracted by something shiny.
That's entirely possible.
but Gorsuch is one thing that they have been out there talking about. And it's, like I said, something we talked about before, whether this is a guy that's worth going to the brink for.
Okay.
And I'm still not convinced he is. Chuck Schumer out there saying that this is not a mainstream conservative judge. And other than a few rulings, not really a lot that convinces me that this isn't your cookie cutter mainstream Republican conservative Supreme Court nominee. I'm not sure this is the guy you use your one bullet in your gun on.
Right. And from what I've read, he's not going to be a departure from Scalia.
Oh no, if anything, he's probably just by virtue of lack of seniority will be less of a powerful conservative voice on the court than Scalia has been.
And up to about a week ago, it was more a joke than anything. But you may see this sentiment gain legs. They were saying that this is like Obama. The Republicans were saying Obama shouldn't nominate a Supreme Court justice in his last year of his presidency. Well, now they're saying the same thing about Donald Trump. Which, it's a funny meme on Facebook. But, I mean, I wonder what the odds are. I'm sure there's Vegas odds somewhere about Donald Trump finishing 2017 as president. I wouldn't necessarily take that bet, but I wouldn't bet against it.
It is interesting, the question of, the Republicans standing on that, you shouldn't nominate someone for the Supreme Court in the last year of your presidency versus the question of whether you should nominate someone for the Supreme Court and have them seriously considered while you're under investigation by your own FBI.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That is the serious part of this whole conundrum is should we let this investigation play out before we vote on a Supreme Court justice, which is a lifetime appointment?
Yeah, and a young guy. I mean, and obviously, I think that's the thing that Democrats are really most threatened by.
And a handsome guy.
He is.
I mean, he's
for a Supreme Court justice.
He's not Anthony Kennedy handsome, but
Well, nobody's really the Kennedys.
So let's go around the table. Give me odds that the Russian story is the thing that either sinks the Trump presidency entirely or makes him ineffectual as a president.
The odds that this could make him ineffectual as a president, I think, are difficult to calculate because he's done so much to make himself ineffectual as a president. Outside that, whether this could actually end in an impeachment or resignation depends so much on politics. It's almost a coin flip.
And I just, with the House and the Senate, both Republican controlled, they are going to push as much as they can through as quickly as they can because they're not sure.
But continuing to fail to pass any of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they did pass one this last week. I think it won, 265 members of Congress, all Republicans, voted to have your internet data sold to the highest bidder.
Ruh-roh.
Yeah. So your search history, sorry, bronies, all your data, all your internet habits
My world
are now up for sale.
Even my World of Warcraft characters?
Somebody will pay to know that you play World of Warcraft and how often, what days, between what hours.
But they won't know that I favor female trolls, right?
Oh, they can. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, okay. I'm going to delete that.
So this, to be clear, this isn't really a new piece of legislation. This is rolling back of an Obama era rule that was supposed to go into effect.
2015. Yeah. It was basically an FCC regulation because Obama was big on protecting privacy where internet's concerned. He was big on net neutrality. And it seems like this is kind of the first volley of tearing down net neutrality, which does no... That was the one thing that really disappointed me about this. The only good this bill did to give away your internet information, it does the voters no good whatsoever. This does not help the average American citizen at all. All this really helps are advertising companies and ISPs.
And maybe prices will be lower if they have a new revenue stream.
I'm sure. It was pitched as...
It's pro-consumer.
It was pitched as quote unquote free market. That was the only justification all 265 members of Congress gave for it, including our own Tom Reed, who got, was it $31,500 in kickbacks from telecom companies for his campaign. The Verge has a list of everyone who voted yay on this bill, Senate and the House, and how much they got from the ISPs. It's one of the coolest things I saw this week. The other cool thing I saw this week was a guy, what was his name? McElhaney. Can't find his first name. He started a GoFundMe page to raise enough money to buy all the internet information from the lawmakers who passed this bill. In 7 days, he's raised $200,000.
How much? What's the goal? How much does he have to raise to?
His goal was 10, because he wanted to buy, like, say, Paul Ryan's internet search history. I don't know what the going rate on that is, but now he's got 200 in the coffers, 200K in the coffers to do that. And that kind of activism is awesome, and I'd like to see more of it.
But that does raise a couple of questions, which is, interesting as that idea is, I don't know that information, regardless of what money you have, is really going to be available as retail. This is going to be it's going to be sold as part of corporate partnerships.
Right. Yeah.
And of course, there's the question of whether we would really want to know what's in any of these search histories.
I absolutely want to know. I mean, if my information can be sold just like that, and I have no choice in the matter, yeah, I want to see what Paul Ryan Googles at 3 a.m. Yes. I want to know what Mitch McConnell punches in. He probably uses Bing.
I bet you that Mitch McConnell Googles Droopy the dog porn.
Is that a thing? So Droopy the dog hentai?
Of course it's a thing. Rule 34.
And we're out.
Thanks for coming, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to the phones. Our seventh caller will receive Supertramp tickets.
I do think this is kind of the opening volley, though, to tearing down net neutrality, which is kind of a huge deal. If net neutrality is broken down, then ISPs can charge you much like, electric or heat by usage.
By usage, yeah.
They can also filter out what they don't want you to see, which is even worse. So if, say, ABC News doesn't have a contract with Comcast, you can't access ABC News. Or maybe you go through Yahoo to play fantasy football. Well, Yahoo doesn't have a contract with Time Warner or whoever the ISP is, so, you can't access your Yahoo fantasy football team now.
Well, but so much of that is already true.
How? Where?
Lots of ISPs charge you by how much you use in terms of total bandwidth, or at least cap your bandwidth and then charge you for overages. And
where?
There's a lot of content available through, say, Time Warner Cable that if you have another ISP, you might not be able to access.
I've never encountered this problem.
It's been around for years. And, as much talk as there was about supporting net neutrality under the Obama administration, nothing was ever really done about those aspects.
No, the most that was done was that 2015 book of regulations that they threw at the FCC.
Yeah.
Which now with Trump's FCC guy, Ajit Pai, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, Pai, P-A-I. I mean, all bets are off. And, how they're going to govern the internet, it doesn't feel like it's going to be open much longer.
I can't help but wonder if we were spoiled for a long time by the relative lawlessness of the internet. It grew at such an amazing rate, faster than we could regulate it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like when newspapers used to give all their content for free and then decided it wasn't a good idea. Well, how do you put the toothpaste back in the tube once you've already squeezed it out? How do you tell people who are used to free internet, things are going to change now?
Or you can view this content here, but not here.
Right.
That kind of thing.
I still remember the days when, if you're going to buy anything really expensive, you'd buy it online, because if you're buying out of state, you didn't have to pay sales tax. Those days are gone.
Yeah.
And they went fairly quietly. Like I don't remember a big ruckus over that change. Maybe this will be something similar. Maybe we'll just accept it and, look at our porn and play our fantasy football and shrug our shoulders and say, well, that's life.
This is the way it is now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think enough people have their heads around this and understand it enough to get upset about it.
That's possible. It's a complicated issue.
Yeah. And, especially for half the internet users in the world, internet came along after they were born. It's, our kids and younger that are really going to be impacted by any changes made now.
Yeah. And just to get a little nerdy on the fact that this is a complicated issue, this has been reported so much as the ability to sell your web browsing history. And I'm not deep enough in the weeds to know what that means. Is that just a shorthand to let people know that their internet traffic will be available for sale? Or is this referring only to actual web browsing history? Because Bob brought up, jokingly his World of Warcraft characters. Well, that doesn't go through anything related to the web. Your online gaming habits, and it's anything, anything that's not in a browser window isn't your web browsing history. It goes over different ports on the internet. Are those things covered? I don't know. And I'm fairly up on these things.
Yeah, and I don't know that any of that was detailed in anything that I've read. Mainly because it probably doesn't occur to a writer of The Verge or the New York Times to be, oh yeah, what about the other ports for playing Battlefield?
Yeah.
And that probably never even occurs to the people writing these stories.
So let me, because I don't get a lot of this. So if I put Pornhub into Google, that might be for sale. But if I open Firefox and put Pornhub right up into the browser address or the address, that may not be for sale. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is
if
that
you look at Pornhub, it's going to be for sale. There's no way around that.
Anything that
RedTube, on the other hand, you can probably get away with.
RedTube, you say?
Yes.
Anything that goes over the web, which is a very specific and relatively small in terms of bandwidth subset of internet traffic. Those are the terms that we've been talking about, but so much of what goes over the internet isn't covered under that rubric.
I interpreted this law as internet usage.
And that's my assumption, but that's not the reporting.
Can I still get to my CompuServe email address?
I'm sure you can get to it.
Am I still going to be able to edit my GeoCities page?
Email, again, goes over a completely different part of the internet than web browsing.
Right.
And how does this impact MySpace?
The same way everything else impacts MySpace. Not at all. MySpace is entirely full of memorial pages now.
Well, from, the World Wide Web to the great outdoors, Bob.
Yeah. Trump v. environment. Talk about taking an unpopular stance. Donald Trump signed some executive orders. One of them is to rewrite the rules controlling carbon emissions, lifting a moratorium on federal coal leases, and removing mandates that federal officials consider climate change when making rules, regulations, and such. Right now, it seems like more smoke than fire, but that doesn't mean there won't be a literal fire in the future as our environment burns. And the thing that struck me as I researched this is it seems like Donald Trump is taking a very unpopular stance in order to mollify his base. I did some research, and I'm not going to pretend I memorize these. This is actual paper that you hear rustling. Last spring, 49% of registered voters said more should be done to address global warming, as opposed to 20% who said less should be done. According to Quinnipiac, 6 in 10 likely voters said more needed to be done to address climate change versus 17% who said enough was being done and 18% who said too much was being done. Gallup, 45% said they were worried a great deal about global warming versus the 37% who answered that question in 2016. So we're seeing an 8% rise in 1 year. So I guess I don't understand. I mean, he won West Virginia, he won Kentucky, largely on the coal vote. But he's taking a very unpopular stance in order to satisfy a very small portion of the electorate.
And he's not going to satisfy them anyway.
No, because those jobs are never coming back.
Those jobs weren't lost due to environmental regulation. Those jobs were lost because it's much cheaper to have a machine dig coal than it is to have a human being dig coal.
Just like manufacturing jobs weren't lost because of regulations, they were lost because of robotics. So that brings me to the question, are they stupid? I mean, what did they have to gain by this? I just read you the numbers. They're on the wrong side of popular opinion. What is their end game? Do they have an end game, or are they just doing whatever feels good?
And that's what I don't understand, because you can roll back all the regulations you want. The presidency's a 4-year term, assuming that you stay in office for the full term. And by the time those 4 years are up, those voters in West Virginia are going to know that they don't have their coal mining jobs back.
Yeah, I'm assuming that the coal miners in West Virginia are celebrating these decisions today. But you're right. In 2019, they're going to be saying, what happened to those jobs you promised? And I don't get the end game with much of what Donald Trump does. I don't understand does he have an end game in mind, or is he just kind of winging it?
I'm not even sure that he makes any of his own decisions. I swear it's kind of Paul Ryan's telling him one thing, Bannon's telling him something else. I don't think the man makes his own decisions or makes his own calls.
Reince Priebus shouting from the hallway into a closed door.
Guys, I have an idea. Shut up, Rance. No one wants to hear from you.
I'm actually impressed that Rance still has a job. I thought by this time he would be unemployed. I'm actually impressed that
there's only so many empty offices you can have in the West Wing.
That's true.
And I'm not sure how much of his legitimacy with mainstream Republicans he loses if that last bulwark of the mainstream is gone.
Well, if
the guy they think that they can talk to who's reasonable is no longer in the building, I don't know who Mitch McConnell deals with. I don't know who Paul Ryan deals with.
if they fire Rance Priebus, they can store bicycles in his office. West Wing reference.
Yeah.
I missed it again.
But
Goats or turkeys would also be acceptable.
yes. Yeah, he appears to be the only grown-up in the room, and he is shouted down at every turn, and I don't know how this plays out. If it were somebody else's country, I would be fascinated. But this is our country, and I'm scared to death.
Here's something I wonder about a lot. If Republican politics had played out differently, and Reince Priebus had not been the RNC chair when Trump took office, if Michael Steele were still there, could we have seen Michael Steele in this White House?
I think better of Michael Steele.
I'm actually a big fan of Michael Steele.
I am too.
I'd like to think he would flat out refuse.
He has a show on SiriusXM's POTUS channel, the All Politics News channel, which is my go-to channel that I listen to in my car all the time.
Sure, way to pitch the competition.
And that probably tells you more than you need to know about, many things about me. But he's such a reasonable guy when it comes to being able to recognize the weaknesses of his own party.
Yes, he is a realist in many ways. And I would like to think that given the clown car that is the Trump administration, he would want no part of it. But I thought the same thing about Rance Priebus.
Yeah. No.
You think he's a
worm. He's been a worm since he came on the scene.
Well, and
he slithered his way into that position.
If we want to go for complete revisionist history, if someone other than Priebus was the RNC chair, would Trump have gotten the nomination?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
It's somebody who had a stronger hold on the reins could have turned that process.
At what point, though? I mean, it was a populist movement. How do you stop that? Just
you can
one by one, the Republicans started lining up behind Trump, and some did so, with teeth fully clenched. You could tell they just didn't want to, but they had to toe the line. He needed some help from the RNC to get the nomination.
If you had a strong RNC chair before the first primary, you could have had half the field drop out and throw their weight behind Jeb Bush or Rubio or Carly Fiorina, one of the, but that's the only way I see. I mean, Trump really captured something in the electorate, whether it's legitimate or whether it's trumped up. I know.
Wow.
I know. Sorry. But he captured the disenfranchised voter. And I don't know if something that the RNC could have done could have stopped that.
Fair enough.
They could have maybe not stopped, but they certainly could have slowed that momentum down a bit and kind of let things fall where they may. But
looking back, I'm not sure who if you were going to pick a winner, if you're going to go back to the 1930s and be the guys in the smoke-filled room, picking who the nominee is going to be out of that field, I'm not sure who you would have picked.
Yeah.
Kasich?
Jeb Bush would have been the obvious choice, and he was such a non-entity.
Yeah.
He just completely lacking in any charisma on stage.
But I do believe that whichever Republican had won the nomination, they would have beaten Hillary Clinton.
You think so?
I think so. I think that she was so disliked, and for stupid reasons, but she was so disliked that the only candidate she stood a chance against was Donald Trump. Maybe Bush because you would have had dynasty against dynasty, and Americans hate dynasties.
I hated dynasty too.
I was more of a Falcon Crest.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And the hits just keep coming.
So we also got some really cool pop culture news. Like fanboy, mind-blowing pop culture news this week on two different fronts. Earlier in the week, it was revealed that Aaron Sorkin, our God and Savior,
That would be Joss Whedon.
Really?
Yeah.
You would elevate Joss above Sorkin?
Everything Whedon's done has been gold. Sorkin hit lightning in a bottle with The West Wing and A Few Good Men.
Newsroom is awesome.
I haven't seen The Newsroom.
I enjoyed The Newsroom.
Enjoyed the hell out of it.
I'm the guy who watched Sports Night.
I'm the guy that watched Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip.
I'm the other guy who watched Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip.
Yeah.
And there were only two of us, literally, that watched Studio 60.
No, there were three.
But his Jobs movie was fantastic.
And he did do a good job with The Social Network.
Yes.
All right.
Moneyball? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that wasn't Sorkin.
I thought he did script doctoring on that.
Okay, then it must have been uncredited. Let me hit the IMDb. But,
All right. And he did do American President, right?
Yes.
So, okay, all right. My apologies, Aaron, if you're listening.
I'm sure he is.
You know,
So it was revealed that he's talking to both Marvel and DC to potentially script a superhero movie. And it just blew everybody's minds that Aaron Sorkin would even think about playing in that sandbox. But isn't it a tantalizing idea?
Yeah, it's and because there was just too much temptation. We talked a little bit before we started recording about this, and it was brought up what kind of movie would Sorkin be writing in the superhero genre, and my thought immediately was, I want to see what kind of regular superhero movie that Aaron Sorkin would write. I want to see what Aaron Sorkin's Avengers would look like.
Probably pretty boring. I don't think giving him the prototypical superhero movie would be a good idea. I think you'd have to go way outside the box, going to like DC's Vertigo line, or what was the Marvel's equivalent to the Vertigo line? Something way off brand and something a little more grounded for him that he could play with.
how about Animal Man?
That would be awesome.
I've always been a big fan of Animal Man.
I'm not sure what he would do with that.
Oh, you never read Grant Morrison's Animal Man run?
He broke the fourth wall.
Yeah, that changed the game.
Long before.
I've heard things. I've read some. I've not run the full run. The Question.
Oh, okay.
I think that could be fertile ground for him.
Yep. Oh, that would be cool.
How about Lobo?
No, not feeling that.
No, me either.
No. But right on the heels of that, it was announced that Joss Whedon.
Solo. Wait a minute. Solo Beta Ray Bill film.
Yes. Yes, please.
Penned by Sorkin.
Maybe an animated series.
Sorkin animated series, you've already got me.
Yeah, I don't know what a Sorkin blockbuster would look like.
It seems like a mismatch.
It does.
But
I'd like to try.
Yes. it may be a hot mess, but
I'd be first in line. I don't care what the early reviews look like. I don't care if they say it's going to burn your eyeballs out of your skull. I'm going to be there.
But it must star Janelle Maloney.
As who? If we're gonna do fantasy casting, then you have to say who Janelle Maloney's playing.
And Josh Molina.
Well, Josh Molina's obviously going to be in it.
Yeah.
How about Medusa and Black Bolt?
So you want Sorkin to do Inhumans?
Yes. Just because.
And Molina is Black Bolt.
Yes.
So he can't talk.
Exactly.
He's just got that imposing presence, you know?
Yes.
Brad Whitford's Gargan.
Who plays Lockjaw? Man, we're deep in the nerd now.
I was going to say,
Andy Serkis to do mocap.
I'm trying to chart in my head what percentage of the audience we've lost as we've gone on.
Oh, we're just talking to ourselves at this point.
Yes.
So yeah, right on the heels of that, it was announced Josh Whedon is going to be
If you say Josh again, I swear I'm coming over this table.
Yes.
I said Josh.
Enunciate.
I have a reverse lisp. So Joss Whedon
Thank you.
is going to be writing and directing a solo Batgirl film.
Which would be awesome.
Yeah, and he is so good with women characters that I have no doubt he's going to knock it out of the park. As long as the executives leave him alone and let him do what he wants, he's going to kill it.
Sarah Michelle Gellar?
Too old.
In what continuity?
The new 52 continuity.
So this is separate from the DC.
Well, it borrows from the I used to be Oracle, but now I'm healed and can fight crime again.
Okay, so this is not canon as far as the Batman v Superman Justice League.
That I couldn't tell you. I don't know how they're going to weave those two together.
See,
And I think that's such a missed opportunity. I still think Oracle was the most interesting incarnation of Batgirl.
Better than Alfred.
Yeah.
and I have no experience with the Oracle. I know why she became Oracle because of The Killing Joke. Excellent comic book, horrible movie.
And I don't know, I just have in my head like this dialogue heavy, mostly bottled into a single room film with an actual disabled lead.
Oh, that would be hot.
Are you being serious?
Hot as in never been done before. Excellent idea. Not hot as in sexy.
That to me sounds more like an indie thing, like an independent, straight to Netflix or Amazon.
So
I'd watch the hell out of that.
I'm going to talk directly to James at this point. Do you remember the Buffy episode, The Zeppo?
Oh, God.
I do.
I would love to see something like that with Batgirl, where most of the action is off screen and you get to see a superhero with an inferiority complex.
Yeah. Also a great take on that. There was a Justice League Unlimited episode, and yes, I'm admitting to watching the Justice League
As you
Unlimited
should,
cartoon,
proudly.
Featuring Booster Gold.
Yes. And
I don't remember the name of the episode now. It's my favorite episode of any of the DC animated series, and that's saying a lot.
And people kept mistaking him for Green Lantern.
Yes. Thank you, Green Lantern. But it was that same kind of thing where you had this huge battle going on, and the sort of C-list characters sort of cleaning up the mess and trying to evacuate the civilians,
like Plastic Man or the Elongated Man, and
Wow, Elongated Man shuts him up every time.
Well, for one thing, aren't Plastic Man and Elongated Man from two different continuities?
I don't know.
No idea.
I'm more of a Marvel guy. I don't know. I know that.
I believe Elongated Man is a Marvel guy as well.
No, Elongated Man that's Ralph Dibny, isn't it? We're getting our stretchy guys mixed up.
Yeah.
I know Stretch.
You may be right. You may be right. My point, which was parenthetical at best, was that I just don't see Plastic Man as a C-list character by any means.
Really?
No.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, he has
I don't remember the reference. People may crucify me for not being able to come up with it, but there was actually a bit in one of the comics when Batman, who's well known for always having contingency plans for dealing with if any of the heroes get turned evil, at one point told another character that the one that he feared the most was actually Plastic Man.
Really?
Yeah, I remember we've talked about this before.
Because Plastic Man doesn't just change his shape. He can turn himself into any object, and that object works.
How does the physics behind that work?
It's
a squirrel girl thing all over again, isn't it?
But he could turn himself into 50,000 megaton nuclear bomb, and it would be functional. And
it's a one-trick pony, but it's a hell of a trick.
How do you counter that?
Squirrel girl.
Fair enough, but it'll happen off screen.
Yes, of course.
And in the old 70s cartoon, he had Yuck the dog. A dog that was so hideous every time he took this doghouse off his head, just people froze in terror because it was so awful looking.
Wow.
But the Plastic Man thing, it just gets into one of the things that I love the most about these kinds of ongoing continuities and comic books and all that kind of stuff is looking at a character like that was created, and it's the same thing as Squirrel Girl in a way. You create a character as comic relief. You don't think too much about the balance of their powers.
Until Grant Morrison does the book.
And then, if you start to look at it in continuity and consider the implications of the powers you've given them just to be funny, you realized you've created an incredibly powerful character who has nothing to do.
Fair enough. I have nothing.
I don't even remember where we started with this.
We sure
Russia,
didn't
I
stay
think.
on topic.
Yeah. Somehow Trump and Russia and Squirrel Girl.
Where else are you going to get that kind of content? No, nowhere.
The House of
Nowhere.
Man.
No one's asking for it. So, supply and demand.
It's the podcast you didn't know you wanted, but now you can't live without.
So I think we've done lots of pop culture at this point. Anybody else have anything exciting coming up over the next week?
I'm just excited that the weather broke. I want to spend as much time outside as possible, maybe play some disc golf, work in the garden. I'm turning off the TV as much as possible and enjoying the weather.
All right.
I'm going to finish up Horizon Zero Dawn and probably take the dog on longer walks.
I have taken on the enormous task and possibly foolish of purchasing a house 3 weeks after starting a new job. And my brain is mostly fried at this point, but looking forward to actually getting through the process. But
It's
hard to
nothing
say.
to look forward to.
hard to say if I'll survive.
So I've got a little interesting side note. Tomorrow, Monday, the 3rd, Monday, April 3rd, yes. I've got 35 marketing students from Alfred University coming to talk to me about a senior project in marketing at my daytime employer, the Arc of Steuben. So we're taking bets on when I get sent to the HR department and how often and whether I'll be employed on Tuesday.
Yeah.
The over-under is 3.
And you open that with you've got 35 marketing students from Alfred University coming, and I'm already thinking you're overestimating your abilities.
Thanks for coming, folks.
It's highbrow. We good? Nothing else we're looking forward to next week?
I'll probably watch the basketball game tomorrow night.
Oh, yeah, that's a thing.
Yeah, this is a thing.
They still play that?
They do. I think opening day is today, isn't it?
Yeah, they're playing ball today.
Wow. So 161 to go. Impactful. Yeah, let's get out of here.
All right. Next week we'll try to do better to stay on topic.
Unlikely.